You know about the protests in Wisconsin this winter, but did you know that they continue?
They say you need no union if your collar isn't blue. Well, that is just another lie the boss is telling you.
Every day, union supporters still gather inside the Capitol and sing protest songs. This man sang about collectivism.
I thought collectivism didn't work.
The whole country functions on collectivism.
How much money does it save, Governor? Just
that particular part doesn't save any.
Okay.
And the battle for Wisconsin's also being fought in Washington.
That's right.
In the same way that
That's
if you
the point.
read the federal budget,
no effect
I'll answer your
whatsoever.
question.
The man the congressmen and unions are mad at is Governor Scott Walker. He won the governor's race by complaining that government and unions were throwing money down a hole.
And long term, you just can't sustain that.
Walker asked them to pay a little more of their pension and health care costs, still less than private sector workers pay. But the union said no.
Somehow they were entitled to a fixed standard of living and a fixed compensation package.
The unions eventually said, okay, they'd pay more of their benefits, but Walker also wanted to rein in their power to get future benefits.
If you don't have a permanent change, they can come back 2 years from now with a new contract and jack up health care costs for the taxpayers.
What do you mean jack it up? You can say no.
Your hands are tied.
We want justice! How about you?
Tied, he says, by collective bargaining rules. So Walker moved to limit those.
If you're under a collective bargaining agreement, no matter what the financial situation of that local government or the state government is, the unions don't have to budge.
They don't have to budge because government has no real competition. Governments, unlike private businesses, don't go out of business when they overspend.
If the private sector, an employer can say, if we don't do this, we're going to move our operations to another location. And then people have to decide whether it's worth risking that. But the difference is in government, you got nowhere to go.
He wants to take away workers' rights to collectively bargain.
John Erpenbach is one of the 14 Democratic state senators who fled Wisconsin to try to stop the legislature from passing Governor Walker's bill. That won the union's adoration. Listen to what happens when we walk to where the protesters can see the senator.
The actual action of collective bargaining, the language of collective bargaining, doesn't save or spend money one way or the other. In the end, it's whatever governor's administration.
Wait, if you can collectively bargain, right, you can get more stuff. That's why they fight for it.
Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't.
The current system is rigged to create a vicious cycle. Money goes from taxpayers to government workers, to dues to the union, and then from the union to the politicians who promise to do more for the government workers. Round and round.
You Democrats give kickbacks to unions that elected you.
What kind of kickbacks? Like what?
Good pension, extra good pensions.
It's a good pension. There's no doubt about that. It's stuff they negotiated.
It's a kickback for electing you.
No, it's the stuff they've negotiated over the years with Democrat administrations and Republican administrations. The reason why public employees support me is, number one, I support what they're doing.
He supports union leaders like Malin Mitchell. Mitchell heads the firefighters union.
You elect your own bosses. You contribute to the Democrats, and then the Democrats pay you back with a good deal. They want to take that power away. I can kind of see why.
We're a nonpartisan union. We contribute to Republicans as well as Democrats.
But I'm looking at the list here, public sector unions, political donations. 92% to Democrats last year.
And that's because we contribute to members or people that are with our issues. And generally, the Democratic way are with our issues.
So that doesn't sound very nonpartisan.
Well, if the Republicans come back to the good side of town, then we'll start contributing more money to them.
Governor Walker isn't holding his breath.
Would America be better off without unions?
Certainly in the public sector. I mean, it's why Franklin...
What's the difference? Public, private.
President Roosevelt, who obviously is no slouch when it comes to Democrats and unions, said that public sector unions would be a problem for the United States.
Even FDR says they shouldn't have collective bargaining rights. But the public, when you do polls today, you're the evil guy who took away their rights.
The unions poured $4 or $5 million into TV ads and talked about rights.
There's a radical move underway in Madison to roll back the rights of our trusted public employees.
This is about our rights.
Collective bargaining rights. Taking away of union rights is not right.
People hear the word rights on almost anything, human rights, civil rights. union rights, collective bargaining rights. That people like rights. This is really an expensive entitlement.
This happened in Puerto Rico 2 years ago. Thousands of union members clashed with police for days. They protested in front of the governor's mansion because they were upset that their new governor proposed cuts far bigger than Wisconsin's. But the governor just smiled and waved. Luis Fortunio says he had to make cuts because Puerto Rico's economy was a mess.
Not just a mess. We didn't have enough money to meet our first payroll.
Agrícola de Puerto Rico.
Fortunio's predecessors had grown Puerto Rico's government to the point that 1 out of every 3 workers worked for the state. And the state was generous about giving out contracts.
They couldn't care. You know, the vendors will raise the prices, and they would just sign the contracts because it was not their money. It was the taxpayers' money.
As a result, by the time Fortunio was elected, Puerto Rico was broke. Fortunio decided the government would handle money differently.
We had to handle it as if it was our own money.
The new conservative majority, the first in Puerto Rico in 40 years, passed Law 7, which shrank the state.
So what'd you cut? Everything. I started with my own salary. I froze all salaries across the government.
People must have screamed. You let 17,000 workers go.
If you can't pay their salaries, what are you going to do?
People called him a fascist, and worse, they said he should raise taxes instead of cutting government. We've heard that before.
Our taxes, as it is, were as high as they could be, actually much higher than in most of the country. So what we've done is the opposite.
He reduced corporate taxes from 35 to 25%. He reduced individual income taxes, and he privatized entire government agencies.
Bring in the private sector. They will do a better job. They will do it cheaper.
But government workers lost jobs.
The unions hate you.
Of course, they felt threatened.
They were threatened. You cut 17,000 jobs.
Some of them wanted to work with us and lowered the government expenses, and some of them did, and saved jobs. Others refused and lost jobs.
One fired government employee threw an egg at the governor.
You ducked. I ducked. But bottom line here is, they will try to push back at the right decisions because a lot of people will rather stay comfortable in the comfort zone and not do what needs to be done.
The governor also cut his government's red tape. There was a lot of that, and that made it hard to open a business.
28 different business regulations and permits to open.
Crazy. Today we've got one regulation. That's it.
Didn't bureaucrats say, oh no, we need all these steps?
Of course they did. There's a permanent government.
A permanent government. That's common everywhere. Government employs hundreds of thousands of people, often just to shuffle paper, and those people lobby to keep their jobs. Like the police officers who did nothing but approve liquor licenses.
There were 250 policemen and women handling that.
Just liquor licenses?
Just to guarantee that you didn't have a prior record, criminal record.
This entrepreneur's mad because to sell marmalade out of her house, she had to spend a year getting government permits. She displays some on her wall. Even though her business is in her home, government rules required her to have an accessible bathroom. This woman's full-time job is helping businesses, mostly restaurants, wade through the maze.
I said, you cook and I take care of the government, and don't worry.
And now the new permit office says the rules are much easier.
It's helpful to have everything in one place.
Now she says it takes just 2 weeks to get permission to open a small store.
How about a copy of Give Me a Break?
This is my version of that. This one was in Delaware.
You want to buy a Fox t-shirt?
Delaware was said to be the most business-friendly state, but it still took me a week to get permission to do this. In Hong Kong, it took just 1 day.
Thank you, sir.
So the 2-week wait in Puerto Rico is still a handicap, but it's much faster than it used to be.
Do you hear now from businesses responding to that?
Of course. Walmart is expanding significantly, and Costco.
600 construction permits were issued in the first few months after the new rules went into effect. This drug company is expanding.
We're going to get more employees, up to 450 employees.
Coca-Cola's begin construction on a Dasani bottling plant that'll employ thousands.
There are a number of restaurants are coming in from the mainland.
Did you ever have a fired worker come to you and say, Governor, you know, I worked in the bureaucracy for 20 years. I would have never left. You fired me, but now I'm glad because I'm doing...
Of course, people like that woman selling marmalade. She used to work for the government, keeping historical records. Being fired was hard.
I feel bad because I have a big family.
But now that she started her own business, she says getting fired was a good thing.
I am my own boss.
So good, she named her company Law 7, after the law that fired her.
It's good. For me, it's good.
And now, if a bar wants a liquor license...
Today you do it online.
One clerk on a computer.
Exactly, and that's it. So we have those policemen and women out in the streets where they belong.
Still, lots of people are mad, especially the government workers who lost jobs. A recent poll showed that if Fortunio ran for re-election now, he'd lose 47 to 25%. Fortunio says, so what?
I don't need this job. I'm doing it because I want to do it.
What do you mean when you say, I don't need this job?
I come from the private sector. I enjoyed what I was doing. I really enjoyed what I was doing.
You can go back to that.
And I can go back to that.
And over time, Puerto Rican voters may come to like his conservative government.
Thank you very much.
Ronald Reagan's popularity suffered when he made cuts. So did Richard Engler's in Michigan and Gary Johnson's in New Mexico. But all were later re-elected by big margins.
I didn't care to look at those numbers because I knew how it was going to be. And I was in Washington in President Reagan's first term. I know how unpopular he was during the first 2 years, but he was doing a lot of the right stuff. And at the end of the day, the numbers came back, and he won by a landslide.
Fortunio's advice to leaders who want to shrink the state?
Do what you need to do quickly, swiftly, like when you take off a Band-Aid, you know, just do it and move on to better things.